Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 110. After 14 years, Paul Naschy returns to the El Hombre Lobo franchise, and we'll talk about Lycantropus, the Moonlight Murders from 1997. I had to watch this on YouTube. I had not seen this before. We begin with a prominent crew and cast. You can find links to a complete credit list in the show notes. I need help finding details on the effects makeup crew. They deserve credit for their work on this film. The film was directed by Francisco Rodriguez Gordillo, written by Paul Naschy, billed as Jacinto Molina. Unfortunately, I could not find much information about Francisco Rodriguez Gordillo. We first discussed Paul Naschy when he burst onto the scene in Frankenstein's Bloody Terror in 1968. The cast includes Paul Naschy as Waldemar Daninsky, Rosa Fontana as Elsa Daninsky, Eva Isanta as Kinga Daninsky, Amparo Munoz as Dr. Mina Westenra, Antonio Pica as Commissario Lacombe, Jesus Calais as Inspector Damage, Louis Maluenda as Reverend Jonathan Leroux, George R. Lucas as Laurent Leroux, Javier Loyola as Biggory, Esther Ponce as Cinca, and Bill Holden as Colonel Wolfstein. Continuing my struggles with finding information about foreign actors, I could find little about Rosa Fontana, Antonio Pica, Jesus Calais, Louis Maluenda, Bill Holden, and Javier Loyola. Interestingly, this is the only credit for both Jorge R. Lucas and Esther Ponce. Eva Isanta is best known for her work in television, particularly for her long-running role as Maita Figueroa in the popular Spanish sitcom La que se avecina, the one that is coming. She began acting in the early 90s. Isanta is a household name in Spain. Amparo Munoz rose to fame in 1973 when she was crowned Miss Spain and then Miss Universe, becoming the first Spanish woman to win that title. She appeared in numerous Spanish and Italian films, with her career peaking in the 70s and 80s. I absolutely recommend this film to hardcore werewolf enthusiasts. While it may not be a masterpiece, it offers some really interesting takes on werewolf lore and has a few very memorable scenes that absolutely make it worth watching for genre fans. On to the synopsis. In 1944 Europe, a gypsy named Cinca is having an affair with a Nazi Wehrmacht officer named Heinrich Wolfstein. She becomes pregnant. Clan elder Biggory prophesies that she will give birth to triplets. According to Biggory, third children are born lycanthropes. The Nazi officer is killed. 52 years later, Waldemar Daninsky is an aging, successful writer. He is suffering severe chest pains related to the cycle of the full moon. He thinks he's in danger of having a heart attack and seeks the advice of his doctor, Dr. Mina Westenra. She performs several tests on Waldemar and finds nothing wrong with him. She tells him to rest and reduce his stress level. Waldemar is happily married to Elsa with a daughter, Kinga, and a son, Christian. Soon after, a prostitute is murdered in grisly fashion. Inspector Lacombe thinks a psychopath killed her and mutilated the corpse. Junior Inspector Damage has a pet theory, pun intended, that a wild animal is the killer. A Catholic priest, Reverend Leroux, believes the murderer is doing God's work. Waldemar dreams of Cinca, and we discover that her third baby, a son, was adopted by another family. He also hallucinates conversations with Biggory, where he learns that he's cursed. Somehow, a pair of jerks know enough about Kinga's family history to harass her about it. It seems Kinga is dating Leroux's son, Laurent. One of the jerks and his girlfriend are the next murder victims. Inspector Lacombe now figures that they're dealing with a serial killer. Leroux doesn't approve of the Daninsky family. Inspector Lacombe consults Waldemar since he writes about murderers and killers. The next victim is a camper, and this time we see Waldemar transformed into a werewolf, tearing the man's throat out. At his next doctor's appointment, Mina prescribes a restful vacation. That's not going to help. The next night, Waldemar transforms under the light of the full moon and kills his wife and son during a rampage. When he realizes what has happened, he is horrified. His hands are covered in Elsa and Christian's blood. The police think he discovered their bodies and is in shock. Waldemar's blood work is now very odd. Mina puts together what's happening when the ghosts of Biggory and Cinca appear to her in a dream and beg her to release Waldemar from his curse. The ghosts lead her to a buried revolver with 6 silver bullets. So, Waldemar being a werewolf and killing people, unfortunately doesn't explain all the murders. Reverend Leroux is also committing murders, eliminating youth that he considers to be immoral sinners. Everyone ends up converging on the Daninsky home. Leroux comes to kill Kinga. Waldemar confronts Leroux. Waldemar turns into a werewolf and they do battle on the front lawn. in hand-to-fang combat. After Valdemar kills the priest, Mina puts Valdemar out of his misery by shooting him with silver bullets. Cops arrive last to try to sort everything out, and the ghosts get to move on. The werewolf transformation scenes in Lycanthropus are a mix of practical effects and early CGI, and I actually love these examples. They aren't much of an improvement on a technical level, but they make a really clever artistic choice. They zoom in tight on a particular feature on Nashi, and then the CGI morphs from his human to the werewolf look. This brilliant idea reduces the amount of work that the computer needs to do. They morph from Valdemar's screaming mouth to the fangs of the screaming werewolf. This isn't as groundbreaking as earlier werewolf films, but it manages to pay homage to classic werewolf movies while incorporating the newer technology. As far as the look itself, I love it as well. It's a very old school human-faced werewolf, but one that is executed perfectly. One neat trick is Nashi's luminous green eyes. They are immediately striking and create several great visuals as we see first his eyes as the werewolf emerges from the darkness. Now, Lycanthropus also introduces intriguing new twists to classic werewolf mythology. The film revisits the concept of inherited lycanthropy, suggesting that under certain conditions this curse can lie dormant before manifesting. Our protagonist Valdemar embodies a very complex heritage. He's a man of mixed blood, part Romani, part German, and the youngest of triplets. The film implies that his parents' forbidden love story is the root of Valdemar's lycanthropic fate. Adding another layer of complexity, Valdemar's father is a Nazi, one of the worst bad guys in history, further complicating his lineage and identity. While the movie adheres to many traditional werewolf tropes, full moon transformations, silver as a weakness, and love's potential to break the curse, it diverges in one fascinating aspect: Valdemar's age when the curse finally takes hold. Remarkably, Valdemar has lived 52 years without any signs of his latent lycanthropy. He's built a life of contentment, happily married, a loving father, and a successful author, both creatively and financially. This begs several questions. How did he evade his curse for so long? Has he been unconsciously resisting his inner wolf throughout his life? And what changed to finally trigger his transformation? My interpretation of the film, heavily influenced by Paul Nashi's stellar performance here, is that Valdemar appears profoundly fatigued. Nashi courageously allows his age to show, both in his facial features and thinning hair. It's easy to imagine that this version of Daninsky has been unknowingly waging an internal war against his curse for decades, and he's finally reached the limits of his willpower. Observing Valdemar's transformation under the moon's influence is particularly poignant. The weariness etched on his face tells the story of a man who has fought a lifelong battle he didn't even know he was fighting. In my opinion, this portrayal stands out as Nashi's finest performance to date. And in what is quickly becoming a theme, this brings me to the first thing I want to explore: the film's exploration of family, legacy, and the balance between nature and nurture. At its core, the film presents a tragic tale of Waldemar Daninsky, a man torn between the curse of his biological heritage and the benefit of his adopted background. This conflict serves as a clear metaphor for the interplay between genetic predisposition and environmental influences that shape human identity and behavior. Valdemar's life took an unexpected turn before he was even born. His Romani clan, fearing his lycanthropy, cursed and cast him out. While his uncle wanted to kill the infant child, Valdemar's mother, Sinka, couldn't bear such a fate for her youngest son. With clan elder Biggory, she secretly gave the baby to a wealthy Polish landowner couple. We know little about Valdemar's early years, but it seems he had a much better childhood than he would have had with his birth family. The story begins near the end of World War II, likely in occupied Poland. Interestingly, the werewolf events in the film appear to take place in Spain. Perhaps Valdemar's adopted parents escaped Eastern Europe's communist takeover with their wealth intact and settled in Spain. We can only imagine how different Valdemar's life might have been with his Romani family, likely harsh due to poverty and constant rejection. Instead, he grew up in a loving, accepting, and comfortable environment. The fate of his siblings remains unknown. Valdemar's tale offers a twist on classic werewolf stories. Unlike most we have seen who are born with lycanthropy and struggle with it from childhood, or puberty at the latest, Valdemar lives a normal life for 52 years before his curse surfaces. The late onset makes us wonder, did his upbringing actually hold his werewolf nature back? The tribal elders' plan to prevent Valdemar's transformation through a privileged upbringing seems to work at first. This hints that our environment might overpower our genetic makeup. But the film eventually shows how fragile that solution is. Despite decades of refined living, Valdemar's inner wolf finally breaks free. Now, the tragedy of Valdemar destroying his own wife and son serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences when long-buried truths finally come to light. This terrible act reveals two things: the overwhelming force of Valdemar's genetic heritage and the deep inner conflict that's tearing him apart. The destruction of the family that he's built and cherished presents a symbolic rejection of his adopted identity, forced upon him by circumstances beyond his control. This tragic turn of events underscores the film's exploration of the price of hidden family secrets and the far-reaching implications they can have across generations. In conclusion, Lycantropus presents themes centered around family and legacy. Through Valdemar's tragic journey, the film explores the complex interplay between biological heritage and adopted family background, and the consequences of hiding family secrets, and the ongoing struggle between nature and nurture. Ultimately, the film leaves viewers with the sobering realization that while our upbringing and choices shape much of who we are, there may be aspects of our nature that are inescapable, waiting to emerge when we least expect them. Next, let's discuss the film's complex tapestry of religious symbolism and moral questions. At its heart, we find an unusual pair: Valdemar, a reluctant werewolf, and Leroy, a murderous Catholic priest. This pairing is more than just shock value. While werewolves often have pagan roots, many medieval legends blend werewolf lore with Christian beliefs. By putting these two characters side by side, the film asks us to think deeply about some big questions. What does it truly mean to be moral? What role does organized religion play in our lives? And perhaps most importantly, what really makes someone a monster? The portrayal of the murderous priest is particularly provocative, offering a scathing critique of organized religion. It's no accident that this film came out after Franco's death and the corresponding reduction in state power granted the Roman Catholic Church inside Spain. The idea of a Spanish Catholic priest believing such authoritarian things doesn't seem out of place with my admittedly outsider's perception of the Spain that Nashi grew up in. Leroy responds to minor sins like alcohol consumption, premarital sex, or drug use with the much more serious sin of murder instead of the much more welcoming Christian call to repentance. By presenting a figure traditionally associated with moral authority and spiritual guidance as a cold-blooded killer, the film suggests that evil can lurk behind even the most sacred facades, challenging the notion that religious affiliation alone confers moral superiority. The conflict between Valdemar and the priest extends beyond a simple physical confrontation, although they do have that. It evolves from a philosophical battle between different moral frameworks. Valdemar struggles to maintain his humanity and resist his violent compulsions. He's not in control when metamorphosized into the beast. In contrast, the priest, ostensibly a man of God, willfully embraces violence and chooses murder. This juxtaposition blurs the lines between monster and man, suggesting that monstrosity is defined not by nature or appearance, but by both one's actions and intentions. The moral ambiguity present in both Valdemar's and the priest's actions complicates the theme. Valdemar, when transformed, commits violent acts that he can't control, raising questions about culpability and free will. Now, the fact that he is an unwilling killer might make him sympathetic, but he's still a danger to the community. The priest, on the other hand, acts with full awareness and intent, justifying his actions through a warped interpretation of religious duty. This contrast invites viewers to consider whether Valdemar's lack of control makes him more or less monstrous than the priest's calculated malevolence. I can see an argument both ways. Valdemar is a monster because of what he does while under the control of the moon. Leroy is a monster because of what he does and the fact that he embraces the violence. The comparison raises the question, which is truly more monstrous, the beast acting on instinct or the man who chooses evil? Lycantropus challenges us to reconsider our definition of what constitutes a monster. Is it determined by one's nature, as in Valdemar's case? Is it defined by one's actions, regardless of intent, which would implicate both Valdemar and the priest? Or is it a matter of conscious intent, which would exonerate Valdemar but condemn the priest? By presenting these complex characters, the film suggests that monstrosity is not a simple categorization, but a nuanced concept that exists on a spectrum. The moral implications of Valdemar's actions, when he's not in control of himself, present a particularly thorny ethical dilemma. While he can't be held fully responsible for his actions in the werewolf state, the consequences of those actions are no less real for his victims. Ultimately, both Valdemar and Leroy die for their actions, suggesting that whatever degrees of difference can be made between the two men, society is only safe with them both removed. Now, in conclusion, Lycantropus uses an intriguing blend of horror and religious symbolism to probe moral and philosophical questions. By presenting morally ambiguous characters, the film challenges simplistic notions of good and evil, encouraging viewers to look beyond surface appearances and consider the factors shaping human and inhuman behavior. Ultimately, the film suggests the line between man and monster is more blurred than we might like to believe, and that true monstrosity lies not in our nature, but in our actions. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing The Creeps from 1997. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.